Soil, not always the topic of conversation amongst people, although even a square meter of soil can hold 1 billion organisms, each one playing a role in the development of a healthy crop. Let's hear from Jesse Hall of Arlington, South Dakota, how he got started farming and what he is doing to preserve his family legacy.
Hello, I'm Jesse Hall, and I'm farming over in eastern Kingsbury County. I currently live on would have been my mother's dad's place where she grew up years and years ago. I started farming back in about 1996. Dad gave up about 20 acres of land. That was kind of my start. And him and I have been farming together, pretty much ever since, until he's passing here about a year ago. Dad's basically the one that got our family started no-tilling here back in 1988. He was friends with Dr. Dwayne Beck. I live on the place here with my wife Laura, and I got 2 wonderful kids, my little boy Cade and my daughter Hayden. Some of the land that we farm is quite hilly, and it's been farmed now, since the late 1800s, and a lot of those hills over the years, there's no topsoil left. That type of impact is something that we have to deal with right now. Whoever farms this land after me, whether it's my son or my daughter, I can eliminate some of the problems so that they don't have to deal with those problems later. At SDSU, I started part-time when I was 16 in '94, and I worked there basically full-time all the way through till 2014. And I had a lot of jobs over the years. My last job where I got into the soil health was with Dr. Sexton. That, of course, I got in contact with Dwayne Beck, and then we were part of the SARE program, which is the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education program, where we flew around the country and went to all these different soil health events. We would go to these meetings, but then we would come back to South Dakota and actually do the experiments, and then we would watch these experiments progress as the summer went by. And I have to admit, I was a little bit of a skeptic at first, but after seeing the difference that this makes, I was just sold on it, and I brought it home to the farm. 1988 was the first year that we no-tilled, so 1987 essentially was the very last year that we did tillage across the whole farm. And over the years, on the wet years particularly, we would really struggle with wet spots, and we were basically a corn-soybean rotation, and occasionally we'd throw in an oat or a winter wheat or something like that, but it's predominantly corn and soybean. Once we started our 3-way rotation, a lot of those wet spots went away. Since we brought in this 3rd crop, our corn and soybean yields have gone up significantly. Our infiltration rates have increased, and when you raise that oats, it also gives you a chance to diversify your modes of action on your herbicides. So the idea is to try and kind of cut down on like water hemp particularly. What I really like about oats is now we have an opportunity to cover crop in it. And now the Jim and I are putting up fences, and this way we can bring livestock back into the system. Is just another factor which is going to drive that soil health. It adds a level of profitability. So here you're raising a 3rd crop that helps increase all the yields on all 3 crops. Then you turn around, put a cover crop in it, drive soil health, then you can graze animals on it. You can't just start no-tilling in 1 year and cover crop and expect stuff to just work out and be perfect year 1. But after 3 years, you're going to start seeing a difference. And I would say within a 3-year span, my soybean yields probably went up 3 to 5 bushel an acre across the farm average, and corn 10 to 12. And that's been pretty consistent. Sometimes the scariest part is just trying it. So I guess my advice to somebody, don't be afraid of it. Try it on a small scale. When you do your experimentation, contact your NRCS personnel, talk to your SDSU Extension Service. They're the folks that can help you with that. Never be afraid to try something new. And if your kid has a new idea, give him a chance, let him try it out. You might learn something from him.
Welcome back to Homegrown Presents. Coming up, Chris Grubel, 5th generation South Dakota farmer and rancher, speaks on the yield of his operation. Moisture, wind, and other natural occurrences affect production, while Grubel and his family adapt to different conditions.
Well, I'm Chris Grubel. We're east of Sturgis, South Dakota, straight north of Rapid City. On the family farm, been here 126 years, my family has. So I'm the 5th generation. There's 2 more generations behind me now. I can remember growing up, boy, you didn't do anything out in Grandpa's summer fallow and my dad's summer fallow. You didn't walk out there, you didn't drive out there. Sure didn't ride your horse across it, but now we've got cattle out in there and we're using that as part of our livestock and still doing a cash crop with the wheat farming and trying to make it all work together. I spent every spring watching that dirt blow in the spring and off the summer fallow and wind erosion, and we always had to keep a good mulch on top of the ground to hold moisture. Now we're doing it with crops, and it's sure nice not to see the ground blow. You can go in all these fields and find every old strip where the edge of the field was because it's taller because of all the blow dirt. A lot of these fence lines over the years get blowed in. We only have about 8 inches maybe of topsoil in this area, 6 to 8, and that's probably being generous. And every year you lose a little bit of that, and pretty quick you're left with hardly anything. Because you get out in the middle of them fields and you can just see the yield go down and then back up when you get to the next. And it's because of that blow dirt. Now, after we've been doing this for quite a few years, we're not seeing that big difference anymore. The fields are getting more uniform again. We don't have near the runoff that we used to. The moisture's staying in the field where it belongs. We're able to graze that cover crop and graze our farm grounds in the fall when we'd traditionally be putting out boughten protein supplement because the native grasses have dried up. And when the protein gets down around 10% or less, we need to be supplementing our cattle. And if we can move them into, for instance, hay ground, this alfalfa regrowth is a really good source of fall protein. The varieties that we plant in our cover crop are doing 2 things for us. They're prepping the soil for the wheat crop, which will eventually be a spring wheat crop, and it's also providing real good source of nutrition for the livestock later on. And by switching from winter wheat to spring wheat, we're able to graze them fields later in the fall. Just give it time. Your soil's gonna eventually soften up on its own. You have to build the worm population and everything up in the organic matter. It's our challenge to try to grow more and do it efficiently. It has to be done economically or we wouldn't be here. This is all I ever wanted to do, was come home and do this. And to be able to build it and to have something for the next generations and to keep everybody busy.
We're about to meet Casey Canupi out of New Underwood, South Dakota. Casey is innovative in experimenting with new techniques of soil management in hopes to ensure a better future, not only for his family, but for future generations.
My name is Casey Canupi. We live in New Underwood, South Dakota. It's about 20 miles east of Rapid City. My great-grandfather homesteaded in the area around 1910, I think. And my family's been here ever since. I have some uncles that still ranch in the area, and then my dad is involved here, and we've been involved in agriculture in this area ever since. I've really started to focus on the soil and the grass and how moving the cattle and how the way we graze affects that. My dad kind of started in on some of that stuff as far as cross fencing and different things, and I'm kind of going a little further. He quit pouring cattle long before I had a say in it. When we've kind of continued with that, it's good for the soil, and probably in the early 2000s, I started going to some classes and learning about intensive grazing and soil and things, and that's really pushed me to want to try new things. Not that everything's a success, but I'm not afraid to try some things. And I think it's important to do those things because if we're going to bring the next generation on, we have to be profitable and we have to be, our land has to be productive as we can make it. It's too expensive to buy land, so I want to try to be as productive as I can with what I have. I don't think quitting pouring was real noticeable. You know, I mean, I think it's been an evolution over time. You know, the stuff maybe doesn't get bred that doesn't adapt to some degree, and I think that it wasn't a big deal at the time. I don't think. You know, it was just kind of a maybe we had a few more open cows for a year or two. I don't remember. I think it's really important to try and be as efficient with our grazing as we can. And we've done a lot of cross fencing to the point where, you know, this last summer there wasn't much hay to put up, so I decided to go to daily moves with our yearlings, and I was really happy with it. I was able to summer a yearling for 3 months on 2 acres roughly by doing that, and they do well. There's something to giving them that fresh piece of grass every day. It keeps them content, and knock on wood, maybe I had a little less sickness, you know, as far as foot rot and pink eye and things that I usually get in my yearlings. And moving them every day, I had that thought too, is, you know, what's this going to entail? What kind of time? But once we got kind of into it, and I did it this year because we had a poor hay crop, and I knew I'd have more time. So, but once you got into it, it's about 15 minutes of putting a fence up and taking the fence down. So, you know, even the drive time, even as far as getting over there, it's a couple miles over there, getting over there and back, you know, looking at, if I'm in a hurry, I can do it in 45 minutes. And so it's really not that big of a deal. And they do make bat latches, and there's some stuff that you can use to, you can set the stuff up ahead of time and do it automatically and stuff. So as far as the work, from what I've seen production-wise and the amount of grazing that I got out of the land, it was well worth my time to do that. Logistics is the thing. It's not something you can do over your whole place, I don't think. I can't anyway. Water's definitely an issue, and you know, the lay of the land too. The place where I was able to do this at is pretty flat. We had pipeline water, so it works there. It doesn't work everywhere, and there's sure pastures where we're in for, you know, a week or 10 days in a bigger pasture, and they drink out of dams and stuff. But I think it's important to try it in places where it works. Try it, you know, see what happens, and then go from there. If you want to expand, then that's kind of up to you and what works for you, I guess. I've started calving later. I calve late April, close to the 1st of May, I think this year will be when we start calving. And it really works for me. It's so nice to calve when it's, you know, the days are longer, it's warmer, and there's close to green grass. It just works for me. And then to go into that too, then I also keep my calves longer. Then I don't sell till January, February. I'll sell steer calves, and in the last 2 years I've left the calves on the cows till then. And you know, if I needed to feed hay, I fed hay or graze, and I've really been happy with that. Not that it would work for everybody, but it works for me, and I haven't seen a real huge negative effect in the cows from it. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I calve late enough that they can get in shape to calve, and then they're in shape again to breed again. By the time, you know, middle of July rolls around to turn the bulls out, they lose a little condition in the wintertime when the calves are on, yeah, but it's nothing that they don't put back on when before breeding time. So I really haven't had any trouble with conception rates or anything since doing it, and the calf health is phenomenal. I mean, when I wean calves in January, the number of calves that need to be doctored are very minimal, if any. So, you know, with the rotation and the soil health, I think you see a lot in recovery. You know, it might get dry and grass dries up, but it doesn't take, you know, you get a half-inch of rain and things will green up and look better in a hurry. And also one thing with the rotation and the smaller pastures is I know it's so much easier to know how much grass I have left, you know, and so I can start making those decisions of when to get rid of things, because, hey, this 80-acre piece lasted 5 days, you know, it makes it way easier to plan when you can see it, you know, with the daily moves or even the weekly moves. Planning is important. You know, I have an idea always in the spring where I'm going to go to begin with the cattle, and then just based on, you know, what kind of days of grazing I'm getting and things and the rain, I adapt my plan. I change things, but it's easier to do knowing what you have and what you can look ahead to or whatever. So I don't spend a lot of time planning, but one thing I do try to do is not do the same thing every year. Start in a different place with the cattle every year, and then start their rotation, and maybe rotate the opposite way one year. And that's something that I guess I've just kind of picked up here recently, and even changing the stock densities and stuff in different areas every year is important, I guess. Trying to mimic the buffalo and be in places where they weren't in the same place every year. They were more in one place one year than the next, and I think that's trying to kind of mimic that, I guess, and see the benefits. You see just a response to the grasses quicker. You know, most of my ground I'm probably on, and I shouldn't say most, but probably half of it I'm only on for 5 to 10 days a year, and then it's got the rest of the year to recover. And having that time, it changes the plants that are there. It gives other plants opportunities to come in. You know, it does. It changes things. It's interesting to see. This year I did a little bit with the cows. I mean, I was up in that over 500,000 pounds per acre into some small areas, and I'm really curious to see what next year brings with that and what it'll do to the soil. Probably in the early 2000s, I went to a seminar down in Nebraska, and there were some, Alan Savory was there, and there were some other guys that were doing some really intensive mob grazing, and I didn't even know who Alan Savory was. I read about it, and they said that you could double your stocking rates, and I thought, man, that sounds awesome. I want to learn how to do that. That's kind of what started me down that road, was listening to them guys and hearing them guys, and seeing what they're doing, and seeing the benefits that they're seeing, and that just kind of jump-started me. And I've been very slow to implement some of the stuff, but I try to continue to learn, I guess, and it takes time to get your mind wrapped around some of that stuff. It's kind of exciting to not do the same thing every year over and over. It's fun to see changes and to see benefits. Sometimes you go backwards, you make a mistake and go backwards, but you have to continue learning. It's easy to fall into that mindset that, we've been here for a couple generations, we know everything about ranching. There's nothing left to learn, but there's always something to learn, and you have to keep going. Yeah, and I started bale grazing probably, I don't know, between 5 and 10 years ago. I don't remember for sure. And I'll tell you the reason. The first year we did some of it was we had a tractor broke down, and so we couldn't run it for about a month because it was getting worked on, and so we started just setting bales out. We go out once a week and set some bales out, and then it turned into now I don't start a tractor maybe every 2 weeks, and I spend about 3 or 4 hours setting bales out. About 3 days worth in about 4 or 5 different pastures, and then all I do is go out and open a gate every few days and let them into the new piece. It's interesting to notice with the bale grazing, you can see a year, maybe 2 down the road, right where that bale sat. This year where we were looking at with the first year residue, there's a thick layer there, the grass is green, there's moisture underneath there. There's just a ton of benefits that come from that I don't think we even know, but it's obvious that it's doing something good. It's beyond me how it works, but it does some good things. So another thing that I've done, last year was the first year I did it. I planted a full season cover crop mix, like 10 species, on some old hay ground, and that I want to farm a little bit. And then I grazed it with my cows and calves in December to January last year. I think they were in there. Roughly, I got close to 60 animal days per acre, I think, off of that with the cows and calves, and I had everything out there. And things were good. They looked good. I didn't have to start a tractor at all. It was definitely something that I'm going to continue to try to do. I guess it worked well. As far as getting started with the cover crops, this was totally new to me. I'd never done anything like this before. We used to farm some, kind of most everything planted back to grass, so a little experience with the farming, but this was just same thing. I guess I went to some conferences, read some about it, and thought that's something I wanted to try. Millborn Seeds makes a mix. It's a grazing mix. I got the seed from them and sprayed a field and planted it. I planted it right at the end of May, first part of June last year. And then it was a full season, mostly sedan grass, oats, sunflowers. I think there's 10 species in there, kale. Yeah, and then it was after. Ideally, I would have liked to have grazed it in the summer. We had enough moisture last year. I could have grazed it during the growing season, but I didn't have cattle around. So I waited till it was dormant in the fall, and then we turned cows in it in December, January. It doesn't look like much, but cattle do good on it, and they flesh up even with the calves on them. The cows stayed in good condition, and the calves did good. The daily moves this year has really sparked my interest in trying to push that more. I want to do more with my grazing and spend more time at it. Maybe haying might take a second place to grazing, I think, for the future for me. I'd much rather be doing that and then paying a fuel bill and paying for twine and stuff. If I can extend my grazing season and put up less hay, that's something that I really want to push towards. You know, if my kids want to come back and things, I want them to maybe something that we could look at as multi-species stuff. You know, is there some other things that we can bring into the place that fits in with the cattle? You know, I know people talk about sheep and goats. So if that's something that they want to do, that's kind of something that I would push for, is kind of the multi-species and seeing if we can see the benefits of that economically and environmentally. I think I did a good job of kind of starting to learn about this stuff, but to implement things. And it doesn't have to be on a big scale. I mean, I thought that right away, that we got to fence everything off and do everything, and that's not the case. You know, start small, but start doing things. And you know, I might try something 1 year, and it might be 2 years, 3 years before I try something new. Yeah, I guess that would probably be the big thing I'd say is keep doing it. You kind of get back in the rhythm of doing other things, and keep pushing to try new things, I guess, would probably be the big thing, and learn. It's easy to sit around with everybody and complain about things that are going wrong and I'm going broke than it is to try new things sometimes, and it's something you have to do, though. We need to bring another generation back to the place, whether it's my kids or somebody else's kids or whatever. And in order to do that, we have to have a profitable business, or they're not going to want to come back, and it has to be enjoyable. These are the things that I need to learn to do that. Otherwise, I'm just going to get old and sell the place, I guess. You have to have that mindset of looking to the future. Otherwise, it's easy to do what you've done, and you get by and you pay the bills, and that's fine. But if we're going to have a future to this, we've got to learn. We've got to pass that knowledge on to our kids.